Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Thursday. It is May the 15th. I'm feeling especially focused despite having sort of garbage for sleep. I've been trying to get this room ready. And if you guys look right up in this corner up here, starting to add some microphone space so we can put some people in here if we make it. I don't know who we're going to bring. If we can make it work, we'll bring some folks in studio. We had our first in-studio guest for the Sunday sit-down with Sarah Adams and Kevin and Peter Johnson and Boone from the Benghazi situation. Kind of a neat little option. I enjoy sitting face-to-face or having people in the same room. There's a different energy when you get to interview people face-to-face. So we're working on it, and I am making it possible, I hope. I want to talk today about this phenomenon I keep seeing on social media. I think it would be wrong if we didn't discuss it in the mindset of prepare or repair. And that is a thing that keeps being called black fatigue. Essentially, it's white people being fed up, but not just white people. It's people in general being fed up with crappy behavior in certain parts of society. And I don't think it's so much black fatigue as we're really tired of liberal ladies who have gone out there, the people that Steve Friend refers to as the worst people in the world. Those people have really exhausted our patience in about a decade. I can trace it back at least to Ferguson of 2014. So maybe somewhere like 11, 12, 13 years worth of just trying the ever living hell out of our patience, and it's gone. But what I want to remind people, one, as a Christian, that is not a really great way to go out and mentally be prepared to be on kind of a hair trigger. But two, this doesn't feel very organic to me. It does feel like it's being boosted by a rage-based algorithm. If the news media is not going to be able to push things the way they want, the Mike Ben-style blob is going to try to get you into action. And so I want people to be, and I had to look this word, I had to make sure that it was properly being pronounced, but indefatigable or indefatigable is the way that it kind of comes out. You should not be willing to succumb to fatigue. I think RFK Jr. did a really nice job of being out in front of Congress and also not being fatigued when he went and answered questions of loonies and libs and so on and so forth. You can arm yourself with information. You can arm yourself with some peace and for knowledge. And if you already know the way that you're willing to respond, it will in fact make you a safer person. The prepare or repair mentality means that if things happen and you have a course of action that you've already considered, you will be better off in the long run. So we're going to talk about a lot of those things. I'm also going to hit a smattering of news or things that are happening only so that we can have a broad awareness of what's happening in this country. I think it's worth knowing. So that's where I plan on going today. Before we get started with that, we're going to talk to the folks that are bringing this program to you. And you may have seen our Sunday sit down with Skip Holtz, who's one of the co-founders of Patriot Protect. In the mindset of preparing so you don't have to repair, you should be aware the Chinese have a data scraping company known as DeepSeek. There are other AI type threats that exist out there, and their goal is to essentially grab all of the information, scrape it across all of the internet, and then make it available to people to make you a victim. That weakens American citizens, and by proxy, it weakens America at large. You may have heard about these things. The only way that you can really protect yourself is trying to pull yourself out of the pile, being aware that that threat exists. And if that is, if your name, if your email, if your social security number, if your address, if your work history, if your drug test results, or other details that people probably shouldn't have are out there, then cyber criminals can reach out. They can find things to effectively target you, where they can either come after you and try and get your money, or they can pretend to be you and get other people's money as you, and then leave you on the hook for it. If you think you're not affected, the odds are very low that you are not. In fact, most people actually are. We're not talking about password leaks. We're talking about information where people can impersonate you, hijack your accounts, destroy your finances, or worse. If you've ever had this happen to you in any meaningful way, this could happen from an ex-girlfriend or an ex-wife or a ex-husband. This could happen from just somebody who just got desperate in your family and wanted to do it. You don't want to be part of this, so check out patriot-protect.com/KYLE. It's way worse when it's a complete stranger because they don't even have to be accountable to you. They're never going to face you at like Thanksgiving. Check it out again at patriot-protect.com/KYLE. It costs you about as much as keeping your porch light on at night. It's not a particularly expensive service. The idea is that you are preparing and therefore you don't have to repair later. It is the system that my wife and I are both using at the moment. And the number one thing you'll see is way less spam calls. It took about 3 months for it to really start disappearing because your name falls out of their piles. But that is really helpful. Anyway, check them out. There's a link in the show description. Let's go ahead and get into today's both headlines and maybe some commentary about black fatigue and RFK Jr., who was in no ways tired. All right. Okay, so let me start with the video of the guy describing this phenomenon. And this is a cultural thing. Again, what I feel like is happening is that we are getting prepped for a summer of, what do they call it? The summer of love in 2020, except it wasn't any love. It was actually a bunch of hateful people. The people that were rioting were not black people. It was a bunch of like angry, crappy liberals, white, crappy women in Portland and Minnesota and Seattle and Washington, D.C. And then there are effeminate, sort of empowering guys that came along with them to help kind of like wear a mask and do some property damage and run away in the darkness. These were not brave people. These were not people that had principles, as far as I could tell. They were people that wanted to cause chaos, and they wanted to express their discontent with the status quo, or maybe their status quo. Here's why I think this is coming down. There is some credible intel that I've gotten from a member who works a lot with law enforcement, and somebody who you have seen me share on social media before. And the intel is essentially that Derek Chauvin may be pardoned. If Derek Chauvin is pardoned, you can expect the left to lash out violently and angrily. Now, all of the things that were wrong with what Derek Chauvin did, I've seen Charlie Kirk do some debunks talking about how the medical examiner, found that the original cause of death was a drug overdose for George Floyd. Again, this would be re-adjudicating 2020. And since it was good enough to derail Donald Trump at the end of 2020, that might be something useful for derailing Donald Trump at the beginning of this 2025 going into his second term. That would be a real dangerous thing. Now, I think Derek Chauvin should be released forthwith. I don't think that there's any way you can say the things he did were not objectively reasonable. But if you are combining a population that is primed with quote unquote black fatigue, in other words, they are tired of ghetto acting black people being that way, and then you also have certain people acting out as provocateurs, and they are willing to lose their ever-loving minds over what they perceived was the injustice. They actually spurred, through mob justice, through sort of like a digital lynch mob, they were able to move Derek Chauvin into a conviction, which I do not think was even remotely reasonable. If you are trained on a tactic as a law enforcement officer, then you should have what's called qualified immunity. That means the department is liable, but you are not individually. And we actually need qualified immunity. There's a lot of people that go out there and speak about this, and they don't really know what the hell they're talking about. You'll hear, voices saying like, "Oh, we gotta disempower the police." Look, if you want to see what not qualified immunity looks like, that's what New Mexico is. They have very low-paid cops who undergo extremely dangerous jobs. There are shootouts that happen throughout the state of New Mexico that you don't hear about, and they happen like on a monthly basis. And everybody who has that Ferguson effect, this was the concept that officers will not properly use force when they think it is necessary. And so they will endanger themselves, they will endanger the subject, and they will endanger the public at large because they are scared of being adjudicated in the court of public opinion, not in a real court where they actually understand the law. Qualified immunity is an ugly concept because it has the potential of being abused. And that means I have a brother, and some of the debates we've had is that he essentially wants like philosopher, jujitsu, MMA, lawyer cops. He wants people that are very well trained in the law, that have incredibly high de-escalation skills, that are physically capable of subduing someone without a weapon. And that's not the reality because we don't pay cops enough to be those things. So the only thing that we can hope that cops will have is a very high scrutiny and the capability of discernment, kind of the prayerful, kind of like a Garrett O'Boyle, someone who's physically capable, slow to anger, has a righteous heart, And that's hard to get because there's a lot of people that are attracted to power for its own sake. You guys can see this in Washington, D.C. I wanted to read something to you that I saw the other day. This is from a person, I thought it was called Infantry Dolt, but it's actually Infantry Dort. I don't know what Dort is, so maybe one of you will tell me in the chat. I saw this written up, and it hasn't got nearly as much play as it could. This is a fantastic summary for those of us who have experienced this sort of thing. This is a Twitter post, so I'm just going to read somebody else's Twitter post. But I read this before I went on Alex Jones the other day. He says there are two types of people, especially in leadership: those who have been wronged by the system and those who haven't. Some of you guys know exactly where you fall. Some of you have seen people wronged. Some of you have been wronged. Those who haven't, they hear fire in your voice and they call it rage. They hear conviction and they call it instability because they've never been betrayed. That word is so critical. They've never been punished for being right. But those who have, they recognize it instantly because when the system burns you and you keep standing, you don't speak from theory. You speak from scars. And this is the divide: system approved versus fire forged. He goes on and explains that in American history, there were people who actually felt this quite viscerally. George Washington, betrayed by the British officers, dismissed as a colonial amateur, returned to lead the rebellion that broke an entire empire. Patrick Henry, labeled as an extremist, nearly shut out of Virginia politics, became the voice of liberty with 7 words that still ring today: give me liberty or give me death. And John Adams, isolated, mocked, politically abandoned, stood alone for the rule of law and ended up architecting American independence. There is an instinct in this country to do what is right against all personal attacks, but it's a very small number of people. And if you want the people to do that, to be in law enforcement, you need things like qualified immunity, because your government will betray you to the will and the mob immediately. So let that be a warning to you. I want to play this little clip from a guy explaining black fatigue. Happily, if you're just listening, he's a black man, so that makes it, I guess, culturally appropriate for some people to listen to him. I think anybody can comment on this phenomenon. There are plenty of people that are sick of seeing inappropriate behavior, sort of like childish toddler type behavior in adults out in public. And yet, it's broader than that, because it's not just about black people. If you were to ask me, he's going to say it's a subset of black people. I actually think it's just a subset of people, including some of these white liberals who have empowered some of the worst behaviors. And then I'm going to give you some examples of it. And we're going to go to Congress because, of course, even Congress people are susceptible to this. So here's a little discussion. Black fatigue explained.
Black fatigue. This video might make you uncomfortable, but it needs to be made. There's a growing sentiment, most recently, of individuals who are proclaiming they do have black fatigue. And you don't have to be a non-black person to have black fatigue. What does that phrase actually mean? Essentially, black fatigue is a growing weariness of the actions of the quote unquote black community. But it goes deeper than that, because we are in 2025 now, and we are being judged based on the content of our character and not the color of our skin. But the interesting part is, the lie that's been sold to the black community in particular is that the color of our skin dictates the content of our character. That's why in the black community, sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, you are acting white, when they're talking to someone like myself who doesn't act the way most people would expect a conventional black person to act. In their minds, there is a correct way to act black. And the people in your ethnic group who fulfill those very negative stereotypes, those are the ones who are going to essentially drag down the collective whole. And that's why there's individuals who are black who do and can have black fatigue, because they see how damaging it is to see the worst of us attract all this negative attention that then unfortunately gets ascribed to the entire race all too often. But what's unfortunate is here in 2025, now we have to contend with the fact that there's people who are so sick and tired of seeing those negative aspects, those negative individuals in the black community attracting all this attention. That's what is spurring this black fatigue. I think it's something that needs to be talked about. And until we turn inward and address the issues in our own communities, I fear that this is only going to continue and get worse. And that's
There's more. I'll post it over on Locals if you guys want to listen to the rest of it. Maybe that's resonating with you. Again, his message to turn inward and look at your own community. How about the community of the people that are in your church, that are following things that are not Christian, that have principles that do not make any sense? The Episcopal Church has decided they're not going to take in any black Afrikaners. There's a small number of them, but they wanted to publicly go out and virtue signal. So this idea that you're going to signal a broader political thing about someone else's individual circumstances. It's problematic, and it happens no matter what color your skin is. That guy, like when I heard his voice, when I see the way that he presents himself in public, he's part of my clan. That's really simple. He could be any number of my friends. I had my father-in-law one time gave me a hard time about going out to shooting ranges and said it's a fundamentally white phenomenon. And I thought about it, and all my buddies that shoot with me are not white, but we're the same. It's not about skin color. It's about values. It's about culture. All of them served in either the military or law enforcement. All of them have some degree of education, but they also have like degrees of like family value and protectiveness. And they actually think that the Constitution means something and they should be able to keep and bear arms and protect themselves. So a lot of this stuff is going to try to simplify, especially even the term. I'm really, really cautious when I see that because that sounds inorganic. It doesn't mean that people are not sick of people acting like a-holes out there. I think a lot of us are. But since the Ferguson riots and the Freddie Gray that happened out on the East Coast, and then what happened in Minneapolis and George Floyd and the riots that happened from Portland all the way to Washington, D.C., it is worth being very cautious right now, particularly if Derek Chauvin does end up with a pardon. And the date that was being floated, and I don't know why this is out there, but apparently there was a letter being shopped around to police chiefs and sheriffs around the United States so that they could mentally be ready, was May the 19th. That's coming up next week. So in the next few days, there's a possibility that there is an inciting event, whether it's designed to do that or not, that will get played up in both media and by people that are radical sort of leftists that want to make sure that there is, in fact, a capitalization on that fatigue and try to push people to a crisis point. It's getting warm outside. People can go out and enjoy the day. They can all be in public. You have much more people or many more people in the streets. Be cautious and be aware. Do not let some sort of mob mentality that goes from social media become a real thing in reality. That's my warning to you. I think it's really important at this moment. And again, this idea that being betrayed by the system, it is a very real thing. So some of us are going to continue to find ourselves on the outs. I think history ends up rewarding some people in that, but a lot of them not. So being a voice of reason is a good thing, whether or not people around you appreciate it. Let's talk about a voice of reason situation here. This is a federal judge in Pennsylvania. We're going to do a couple things on the judicial system. It's pretty relevant. Federal judge in Pennsylvania rules that Trump's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act is in fact lawful. You're seeing an MS-13 guy being taken into custody with the horns. Those are a MS-13 gang sign that he's got thrown up here. It stands in contrast to the ruling of other judges. We are now pitting judges against judges because our judges have to go out there and combat their judges. Even though it's pretty clear when you read the statute. Like I don't, if Trump was using something that seemed totally inappropriate, it'd be one thing. But the entire spirit of the law of this quote unquote 18th century wartime authority, this is ABC News reporting on it. So of course they have to go back to the age of it. It turns out, as Tom Holman said once, the Constitution is older than that, and we still think that's pretty important. So either the law is a legally binding law or it is not. The age of it or the time that it was passed should be basically irrelevant. The person who did this was a Stephanie Haynes. The ruling stands in contrast to two other federal judges who have ruled that it was actually not appropriate for deportations. They've invoked this to be able to get rid of some non-citizens with what is being referred to as little to no due process. I'm sparing you a CNN clip right here, but allow me to summarize it. There is a massive misconstruing of actual information which says that a civil process like deportation requires criminal due process in a court of law. It's not a criminal process, so it doesn't require criminal due process. What it requires is administrative process, and that must be due. And in the same way that I was removed and it was considered to be adjudicated by the FBI and then the DOJ and the different entities, there are all kinds of things. Anybody who's ever been in the military knows exactly what I'm talking about. There are plenty of things where the government decides that the government is going to do something and then decides that the government's process was in fact followed, and you eat all the consequences. It happens all the time. Just because it didn't happen in front of a federal judge or a state or local judge who is there to decide balls and strikes in a criminal case does not mean that you did not get due process. And so the left will conflate this sort of thing, just like they're going to conflate things about, one cop trying to do something that he was trained to do and make that a broader social impact. If you listen to what the left said in 2020, you believe that Derek Chauvin was out there looking for a black guy to stand on and kill at some point in time. And that's craziness. All right, more judge stuff, because again, I think a lot of these things come together. We have an inherent distrust right now in what our legal system will do. Here's CBS News reporting on a federal judge, and she was indicted by a federal grand jury for interfering with an immigration case. Now, you can indict anybody. It doesn't take a ton of work, and it is an ex parte hearing where the government comes in and says, this is all the best evidence we have that says they did this thing. We're trying to present that there is probable cause to believe that a federal crime happened. If there's exculpatory information, they don't have to present it. The only interesting thing about a grand jury indictment is if there is significant exculpatory information, then it means that there's a likelihood that United States attorney will fail when they bring it to trial if they don't get a plea. And so it is in their best interest to only indict strong cases. While you can indict anybody, and oftentimes that can be done for political reasons, because then you can say this person has been indicted, and so therefore it is a slam or a smear on them publicly, you don't generally want to bring cases if they're not strong enough to stand on their own 2 feet, for whatever that's worth. This was written yesterday, says a federal grand jury indicted on Tuesday a Wisconsin judge accused of helping a man evade immigration authorities, and the case will now continue. The United States Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Wisconsin confirmed the indictment to CBS News. That followed the arrest and a clash between this Trump administration and the local authorities over the Republicans' sweeping immigration crackdown, whatever the heck that is, a sweeping immigration crackdown, something that has incensed people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's very upset. She do not like it, not even a little bit. She's mad that, and this is an article coming from The Hill, she's mad that they're going out and doing the job that they are sworn to do. It's pretty interesting because I watched a turn. Initially, when Biden came into office, they said that the reason that all the people were coming is because we're a very bad, dirty, racist society, and we're unwelcoming, and therefore we need to be forced to deal with all these people coming in. And you remember, right when Joe Biden got into office, there were people coming in. They looked very funded by some group or another. We can't always know exactly where the money comes from, but they were wearing like Joe Biden let us in, and it had the same logo from his campaign. And then when it became a sticking point and dollars began getting tighter under inflation and bad policy, then they were like, listen, all you got to do is give us more power and we can fix the border. But we can't fix the border as it stands. Nobody can just do that. Congress has to act. The president can't do anything. Then Donald Trump comes in, and a couple days in, they've already tightened down the border. Everything gets a lot squeakier. And suddenly you've got guys like Donald Trump out there talking about it, saying all we needed was a new president, and it turns out that the evidence is probably in his favor. So now it's time for them to squawk. Ocasio-Cortez words that there will be quote-unquote problems if Democratic colleagues are arrested. This comes in the wake of members of Congress out there fighting with ICE agents. We showed you some video of that the other day, body slamming or otherwise. The fact that a member of Congress, and in this particular case, it's a fat black lady who was out there getting in the way of federal agents just doing their damn job. They're not, you're making it much more dangerous for the people that are trying to make something like bring somebody into custody or transport them safely. If you're going to get in between them, maybe that person decides today's the time to fight. Maybe they want to go and grab a congressperson and strangle them. Maybe they want to go out there and try to access a firearm, because we have some female law enforcement officers who have no business carrying guns. We have some males that have no business carrying guns. I highlighted one on social media the other day. It was a woman who was wearing her body armor, and probably for the first time, and her shirt was actually covering the butt of her grip. And so her holster was completely concealed by her own body armor, which means it is impossible for her to draw a weapon. So her only option was to fight and or maybe die against a physically stronger male. In any case, AOC has a little threat for Tom Homan, and that's kind of funny for those of us who know how these kind of things work. Jake Tapper decided to hold his feet to the fire and ask some questions like, hey, are you worried because they're going to withhold your funding, or they're going to do whatever this. Tom Homan has probably the most gangster answer you could have. He points out her age, her experience, and in contrast to what he has seen or done, and everything about this. I don't like appeals to authority, except when appeal to the authority is the only way to answer the question, because we're not talking about people of similar gravity. Tom Homan may sound kind of like a guy who slurs over his words, but maybe it's because he's been doing this for literally decades and doing it longer than AOC has actually been alive. So here's a little takeaway, his little exchange with Jake Tapper, which made me smile.
First of all, you can't intimidate me. Come on, give me a break. I was enforcing it. I was wearing a green uniform, Border Patrol agent, for 5 years before she was even born. I had more than 3 decades enforcing immigration law before she became a member of Congress. I worked for 6 presidents. I've seen policies. I've seen hundreds of policies. Some worked, some didn't. What you can't deny the success of the Trump administration when it comes to border security. Again, the most secure border in the history of this nation. And I said from day one, and she knows this, you can not support ICE. Shame on you. You can support sanctuary cities. Shame on you. But you can't cross the line. You can't knowingly impede ICE law enforcement officers. That is a felony. You can't harbor and conceal, knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien from ICE. That is a felony. And you certainly can't commit criminal trespass. You know, and as far as New York, her district, this administration has done more to protect her district than she has. The number of criminal aliens we took off the streets of New York made her community much safer. She ought to be thanking the members of this administration, the men and women of ICE, who protect this country and make her community safer. So, you know, it's politics over public safety. It's just ridiculous. She ought to love her community more than she hates Trump, because we're doing a lot to protect her community.
You see Jay Tapper just sitting there like someone spitting in his face. He's blinking repeatedly behind his little Rachel Maddow glasses. I really do like that. I mean, he, like I said, he's not the best and most eloquent speaker, but he is getting a message across that seems incredibly accurate. It's no BS. That's true. Like, how about you just worry about your community and having illegal aliens in your community? Why are you fighting on behalf of those? The funniest thing is, and I heard someone say this on CNN as well, and I won't belabor you with the clip of that. Essentially, Republicans have baited a bunch of the hard leftists into defending gangbangers and wife abusers and criminals more than they defend their own constituents. And it's tiring. People are tired of it. People are having more like liberal, retarded Democrat fatigue than they are having black fatigue. That's been my experience of it. I'm watching it, and you could just see people, they're fed up. Even regular people just go like, that's how you end up with David Hogg saying things that are somewhat reasonable. How you have Bill Maher just walking around going, what in the hell are you guys trying to do? It gives us leeway, by the way, that single fact that the people in the political left are so unorganized that they have Eric Swalwell out there representing them, saying one thing and then immediately being smacked down by facts a few seconds later, where CNN is having to report wins for the Trump administration left and right. That actually gives you more room as a conservative and an independent, kind of the place where I sit, to punch back, push back, and try to help guide good policy. People like Tom Homan get it. They're doing the thing. Almost all the major wins that we're seeing that are happening, they're happening by quiet action and overt action by ICE, DHS. Like they're getting that work done because they put a serious person who understands the threat. And then you have people that are not getting it done. And I'm talking about my ex-girlfriend here. They're not getting it done. They still have cutesy time continuing at like ad nauseum. We did it yesterday. I had a text message from George Hill this morning telling me that he was shocked when he heard that that the special agent in charge of the Philadelphia field office is literally married to the woman that was working with the special counsel and was like trying to indict Trump and trying to get him removed from polite society. When you have people who are enemies of the agenda that are still working inside of your administration, inside of your agency, it is our duty to call that stuff out, because I don't know if they just don't know and they don't have the mindset, if they don't have the institutional knowledge, but it needs to be addressed. We're going to do a quick little plug here as we're talking about preparedness. There's one that you guys might want to think about. It's our friends over at My Patriot Supply. This is the company that we use here in the Seraphin household. They have the 90-day food supply. Right now, their deal is on the smaller increment you can get in. It's the 30-day food supply. The thing I like about this is that there is a free 4X free 72-hour food kit that's 3 days for a grown adult. There's things that are happening, whether it be trying to push this algorithmic boost of black fatigue, or whether it's the foreign threat of the Chinese buying up farmlands by the hundreds of thousands of acres. There are issues that you should be probably aware of and not fearful of, but just you make preparedness on. You can take control of your supply chain, of your needs up front, or you can wait and let the Chinese do it, because they've been buying up things like fertilizer and animal feed, and the companies that make farm equipment and so on, they're trying to tighten their grip on global food production. That's a really, really easy. When people get hungry, they get desperate. If things go south, you want to be ready. That's why we have My Patriot Supply. They are the largest emergency preparedness company in America. And right now you can get their 4-week emergency food kit with 4 free 72-hour food kits. Again, stash them somewhere, put them in a vehicle, use them for training so you know what it's like to actually prepare them and what you might need, whether it be a pot or water, et cetera, et cetera. Check those out. You get those for absolute no money on top of it. So again, 4 weeks, and then you get an additional 12 days of food absolutely free. They last for up to 25 years, so you don't have to use them right now. You can just hold on to them. They're a personal insurance policy delivering 2,000 calories per day, and they are shipped fast and free We don't know what the world's going to do. We can't control, the overseas or the domestic, but you can go to preparelikekyle.com. Again, it's preparelikekyle.com. Check out the link in the show description, preparelikekyle.com. You're going to get 12 days free. It's almost half free on top of what you're buying over there. This is a good entry-level way to get something in your little sort of pantry so you don't have to worry about what's coming your way. Okay. Let's continue on. Speaking of things that are coming our way, this could be coming your way. What about pizza? Could you be getting pizza? Speaking about food, federal judges are now experiencing the nationwide pizza doxing, and so suddenly it's a problem. Conservative influencers, conservative media figures have been getting these pizza deliveries for several weeks now. Apparently, it has now made it to the level where some federal judges in various places are getting it, and so it is now again a national concern for the left-wing media. This is coming from CBS News. There's a couple of others that covered it as well. Top prosecutors in Washington, D.C. That's formerly was Ed Martin before he was removed, and he's on his way over to DOJ right now. He said that the incidents of so-called pizza doxings are a spin on doxing, in which somebody's address or personal information is maliciously made public, often as a form of intimidation. The judges have gotten unsolicited pizza deliveries with the recipient listed as Daniel Andler. That's the late son of a federal judge in New Jersey who was killed in the New Jersey family's home in 2020 by a disgruntled gunman who was targeting that judge, Esther Salas. They're calling this psychological warfare, attempting to say essentially that there is danger coming their way. As somebody who had their information shared online, I think there's a moderate position. If you are actually trying to align with threats, if you are putting the name of somebody who was killed by a gunman that showed up at somebody's house and was targeting a federal judge, that's pretty overt. That's on the nose. We can draw a direct line there. But the real question for me is, do these people have the ability to carry out what they would call a true threat? The true threat means they actually have the means, the motive, the opportunity, and the willingness to go out and do the things. I don't think these people do. If you're out there busy looking up addresses and your big flexes is that you're going to send pizza to someone's house with a name that sounds threatening, come at me. And isn't that the reason why we have the fundamental freedoms in this country, that you're supposed to be able to, carry a firearm? And that's why we had the Heller decision that said you don't have to just wait there and accept and hope that the police show up. There's a need for Americans to take personal responsibility in most of our lifetimes. If you're listening to this based on the audience demographics that I've seen, in most of our lifetimes, you have probably grown up with a phone book where they listed your name and your address and your phone number, and somebody could just pop in. The joke is that somebody might have a cake set aside. There are TV shows from the 70s where kids are trying to eat the cake that is for company should they show up, and they want to slap you away, right? Because at any moment, someone might just pop into your door. Now, more and more, as we spend more time dealing with things online, connecting with people digitally, we're out there texting folks. I'm reaching back to where my phone would be. You're texting them. You're not even making the voice communication. A lot of times, the phone was used when I was growing up. The phone would be, hey, I'm on my way over. I'll be there at this time. And it's like, cool, we'll see you then. You didn't have the entire conversation on the phone. My wife's aunt was talking about it the other day, that you can give kids a limited minutes plan. You just hope that they don't have a friend out in Europe. I remember when long distance was a thing. We used to have to pay if you called somebody outside of your area. We've had a dramatic change, even in my own lifetime. And I'm not that old. I'm in my 40s. So for that to be the case, we have moved that exposing, like someone ordering you a pizza with somebody else's name on it. Yeah, that is a little bit of a threat. But the idea that your information would be put out there in the white pages where someone could look you up and find out where you lived, and that is somehow a threat. It is a big turn. We've gotten both more social in the social media sense, but we've gotten more antisocial to the point where when you're out and you're sitting at the park, people don't want to look you in the eye and just talk to you like normal people did. Some of the most interesting communications and the most interesting social interactions I've had were literally standing where my kids were, like every other parent. You're just standing there watching your kids play, and then you have a common experience. And that experience is you both have kids that are playing on the playground right now. You have a lot in common then. I already know a bunch of things about you. You're most likely responsible for another human being. That means you probably have to be a productive member of society to some degree or another. We have some values in common because you've brought your child to play, right? Some of these things you can just intuit. The problem is that we've brought a lot of people into this country that do not share our values, and it is currently being adjudicated right now in the courts. It's kind of interesting where the left gets in there and tries to take over. Here it is. Birthright citizenship being disputed by the Supreme Court. It has broad implications for Trump's agenda. I guess the Supreme Court is going to let this thing play out, and they're going to try. I think the verbiage is kind of dangerous. It goes back to, speaking of old decisions and old laws, it goes back to an 1898 decision about birthright citizenship when it was challenged for a Chinese immigrant and whether or not you could come here, have a baby, and then you would be able to say that that person is in fact a citizen, whether or not the parent was. Trump is trying to push something through the executive. What should happen is that we should have members of Congress actually go out there and clarify what is and what is not the route. And maybe there is a route if you come here and have a baby in the United States for that person to become a citizen. But I don't think the default is. And the reason I say that is because we've got folks that are currently running around attempting to just drop a child here. And then you've got the same people crying about exporting a child, right? You're a bad person because you came here and you allowed a kid to be removed that was a U.S. citizen, but their parent wasn't. What are we going to do? Keep a bunch of 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds? This is MSNBC having a truly disingenuous conversation about this. I think it's why it needs to be adjudicated. I hope the courts do the right thing. Marco Rubio versus Meet the Press. Here's a little taste.
3 U.S. citizen children have been deported with their mothers. Now, this is according to the Washington Post. The family's lawyer says one of them is a 4-year-old with stage 4 cancer, deported without medication or ability to contact doctors. The family's lawyers are also saying their clients were denied communication with family and legal representatives before being deported. And it's raising concerns about the issue of due process, that it's being violated. So let me ask you, is everyone on U.S. soil, citizens and non-citizens, entitled to due process?
Yes, of course. But let me tell you, it looks to an immigration standing, the laws are very specific. If you're in this country unlawfully, you have no right to be here and you must be removed. That's what the law says. Somehow over the last 20 years, we've completely lost this notion that somehow or completely adopted this idea that, yes, we have immigration laws, but once you come into our country illegally, it triggers all kinds of rights that can keep you here indefinitely. That's why we were being flooded at the border. And we've ended that, and that's why you see a historically low number of people not just trying to cross our border, trying to cross the border into Panama, all the way down in the Darien Gap. I mean, it's been a huge help for those countries as well. On the headline, that's a misleading headline. Okay, 3 U.S. citizens, ages 4, 7, and 2, were not deported. Their mothers, who are legally in this country, were deported. The children went with their mothers. If those children are U.S. citizens, they can come back into the United States if there's their father or someone here who wants to assume them. But ultimately, who was deported was their mothers who were here illegally. The children just went with their mothers. But it wasn't like, you guys make it sound like ICE agents kicked down the door and grabbed the 2-year-old and threw him on an airplane. That's misleading. Yeah. That's just not true.
Just to be clear, because I do want to get to the overhaul at the State Department.
But here's the problem. That totally destroys my point. What I'm trying to say is that you're mean. And you made illegal aliens follow the law, but their kids are citizens and they're anchored here, and we should respect that because it really helps our cause. But not any, it doesn't help America. These people hate this country, it seems like, at least based on their advocacy, or they're just antagonistic to what a bunch of Americans would think. What's really funny is that there was a survey, so I had to go out and do a little bit of background. A couple of different things. The first story was coming from NBC, so I read a little bit about this. Then ABC has a cover story. A pregnant Cuban immigrant worries about her baby's citizenship as the Supreme Court weighs the Trump order, the executive order basically saying that there's no such thing as birthright citizenship if you don't have a country connection, if you're not supposed to be here. So they always go out and try to prove, this is the same kind of tactic as trying to prove that abortion is necessary because instances of rape and incest. And I don't know why they always put rape and incest together, but they always do. Barbara, okay, that's her name apparently, or maybe they made up the name, is a Cuban immigrant, 30 weeks into a high-risk pregnancy. No further information about the pregnancy, and is dealing with the additional stress of not knowing for sure that her baby girl will be an American citizen. Well, let's see. She's not an American citizen, so that seems useful. She says, it scares me that my baby will be born without citizenship because she won't be a citizen of this country. Claiming Cuban citizenship is not an option because we are fleeing from that country. Well, it actually is an option. It's just one that you don't prefer. I get that. She said, I don't know what kind of future my baby would face. If she's saying this all in English, by the way, she is not the problem that we are talking about. I'm terrified that my baby will be born without citizenship. It'd be like she would be stateless. It's terrible. She's a 35-year-old woman living in Kentucky, which is not among the 22 states that have sued to challenge Donald Trump's executive order that would deny citizenship to children who are born on U.S. soil to parents that are in the country illegally or temporarily. But that seems totally logical that you would do that sort of thing. You should not be able to anchor yourself into this nation because you dropped a child in here, and then now we're suddenly on the hook. And again, Marco Rubio makes a really great point. They deported the mother, and babies go with mothers historically for all of humankind. Like, there's never been a time when that wasn't the option. What would be the alternative? That the American government raises their kids? I've got a really good reason why that shouldn't be the case. Why schools or daycare systems shouldn't be funded to do it. The best person to raise your child is you when you're a parent. And anybody knows that. There are some minor exceptions. You could go out there and go after it. This is the same reason why people go like, well, women shouldn't rely on men because some men are bad guys. Okay, yeah, sure. Some parents abuse their kids when they don't have supervision. That's true. That's true. Those people probably shouldn't be parents. We can agree on these things. These are not like contentious. These are not mutually exclusive categories. So NPR went out and did what they do, which is they went and asked people a question. And I can't figure out exactly how they phrased the question, but I'm really excited to report to you that the majority of American citizens oppose ending birthright citizenship. So says a wild leftist poll by NPR and Ipsos. As the Supreme Court takes up President Trump's push to end birthright citizenship, a new NPR Ipsos poll, this is again trying to rule like the mob. This is trying to shape justice and see, hey, listen, what you're doing is unpopular, judges. So you better convict Derek Chauvin. You better make sure that birthright citizenship sticks around the way that it's written, that we like it, from this old law and or case law from 1898 about a Chinese lady. Totally not related to what's going on here, but you need to do it. Because otherwise you're going to outrage the people on the left and the majority of Americans, so they say. Americans do not like the idea of dropping a long-standing principle that any child born on U.S. soil is automatically a U.S. citizen, even as other parts of the immigration crackdown draw wider support. The reason why that is, I suspect, the reason why the majority of Americans would you say, hey, do you support the right that if people are born in America that they automatically become a U.S. citizen? And people would go, yeah. Then the next question should be, if they don't have American citizen parents and those parents have to be deported, do you agree to leave those people in the country here illegally indefinitely, or do you agree that we should pay to raise their kids? I think you should be honest about your polling. They don't do these sort of follow-ups, but that would be the reasonable question. Do you think that the American taxpayer, specifically you, the person being polled, because if you're not a taxpayer, I don't care what you think. I actually don't. The real question should be, do you pay a net positive in taxes to the United States government, the federal taxes? Okay, if yes, then the next question is, do you think that birthright citizenship is something we should continue? To say that if you're born here, then you become a citizen. If yes, do you agree that if that child is born here and the parents have to leave, do you agree to personally help pay as part of your taxes to raise that child, to keep them in food and shelter and housing and all the other things that need to be done, education? Are you down to be able to take on the bill for that kid because the parents are no longer allowed to be here? And then lastly, do you agree to also support that parent, whatever it means, so that they have food and medical and they have shelter and access to transportation and whatever else? Are you good with all of those things? Do you want to take on the bill of people that come here, even though they didn't follow the laws, but they happen to plop out a baby? And is that a kind of a nasty way of saying that? Yeah, but that's how we see it. And it's not crazy to think that you don't belong here. They act like you're the crazy person. The majority of Americans oppose ending birthright citizenship right up until the point where they have to realize what that looks like. I think that these questions should also involve the consequences of that decision if you're going to say yes or no to the simple question, because it's not that simple. The minute people start expanding, the reason that you could open people's minds is you ask them questions and then you add a little context and suddenly their answer shades differently. Like in the abstract, I think that people who are born in America are American citizens. But in the reality, I'm not willing to pay for them. So maybe we could change your mind. That would be reasonable. That's kind of like using your BS detector, isn't it? I just wanted to put these two on the screen together because there's Eric Swalwell in kind of a spitting rage, and there's Kristi Noem, who looks really rough. If you actually look at her under the lights, she must wear so much makeup. It only bothers me because she's trotted out here to a bunch of people over the age of 50, like she's this she's this bombshell, and she does really sort of disingenuous things like standing with a rifle pointed at a guy's head. She's not the best example of what a cabinet member is. So Fox News out here promoting her, and that's what this came from. This is a Fox News headline. Swalwell warns Noam that he has a BS detector during a heated exchange about Abrigo Garcia. She won that exchange, and she did give away the Trump administration goal, which is to make leftists and Democrats defend indefensible positions. Make them defend gangbangers, child traffickers, wife beaters, and people who break American laws. I think it all kind of ties together. So the Trump administration is getting wins even against Eric Swalwell, even with this imperfect vessel who does like these, TV hits. And yet the fundamental point and the reason is good. It makes perfect sense. If you want to see what a actual kind of bombshell looking lady is, like maybe it's just because she's a little bit younger, maybe because she's got that sort of, she's polished in a way that I don't think Noam is, and she actually handles the weapon a little bit better. I'm still cautiously optimistic about Tulsi Gabbard, only because I keep getting more and more people telling me, people who have met her privately, that she actually did change her mind. I did read her op-ed. She had a Substack post about why she believed wrongly about the Second Amendment and why she's opened her mind up about it. When you're talking to somebody who's an Army PSYOPs officer, I don't necessarily say that your job is your existence and your reality. That's like people telling me like, well, you were an FBI agent, so you were trained to lie. It's like, if you saw the training, you'd be way less impressed. I'm going to hope that Tulsi Gabbard is in fact being honest, and she keeps doing things that are kind of a win. This is a story from the Rachel Maddow blog, the MSNBC world. They're really mad because she's quote unquote firing the wrong intelligence officials. So saith former CIA directors, and she's firing them at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. This is a play on the Chris Wray, who was a deep state sycophant, who was a quote unquote registered Republican, but always favored whatever was going on in the agency. He was a government solutions kind of guy. He used to say that the FBI does things in the right way for the right reasons at the right time, whatever else with the right motivations. Tulsi Gabbard is apparently firing the wrong intelligence officials for the wrong reasons at the wrong time. That means that I like it. This is Steve Bannon, not Steve Bannon. This is Steve Bannon, who's kind of a doughy old guy, writing about this on the Maddow blog, saying that Donald Trump has spent months insisting that Venezuela's government controls the TDA gang as part of a larger argument to justify removing these immigrants. Again, this is an Alien Enemies Act, to a Salvadorian mega prison. The problem is that the assertion, like so many of the president's claims, is completely untrue, as adjudicated by none other than the arbitrary and totally reasonable MSNBC, aka the hard left. And we know this for certain because the Trump administration said so. In other words, whatever Donald Trump says is a lie. This is the premise of the article. You lost me right there. How about you make an actual argument? That is the worst kind of an argument to authority. It's not that I have all this knowledge. It's not that I have all this experience. It's not that I speak from authority because I have, sources and methods and I have proximity to this actual threat. It's like I'm a guy who writes stories and my audience thinks that it's not true. So I'm just going to just affirm whatever their bias is. And they're really mad because they got rid of, quote unquote, two top officials at the National Intelligence Council. We've had some inside folks and some journalists kind of tell me that what's going on inside of the ODNI, the Office of the Directorate of National Intelligence, is essentially a coup counter coup situation. That Gabbard has walked in there, having been a victim of weaponized government. Hold on, ready? Here it is. That's not it. There it is. Sorry. There are two types of people in leadership: those who have been wronged by the system and those who haven't. Okay, that goes back to the first thing we talked about. If you've been wronged by the system, and Gabbard has, no doubt. She got cast out by the Democrat establishment. She was trailed and she was investigated and she was surveilled by the Biden administration for her lack of loyalty to their party instead of trying to go over on some basic American principles. In the end, 90s Democrats and I probably have like not very much daylight other than I have a lot more Christian principles. But at the liberty end, they used to be pretty close to what we are right now, which is why Donald Trump is not antithetical to a Kyle Seraphin worldview. Yeah. You guys are saying it on the chat. She got put on Quiet Skies, right? If you have not seen it, we talked to Sonia Labasco, who I talk to almost every single day, or at least I text with every day. We have a group chat of all the people that you've seen that were government whistleblowers that were on this show at any point in time in the last 2.5 years. We all talk every day. You guys don't know that. I guess I should say that to you. I talk to Aaron Stevenson on a daily basis. I hear from Sonia Labasco on a daily basis. I talk to Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend on a daily basis. We occasionally hear from Marcus. Mostly he just reads and lurks, which is what you kind of expect from an intel guy. That's kind of his thing. I talk to George Hill on a daily basis. Talk or text. We're all keeping track of these things. And Gabbard is essentially in the same category of people like us. She has seen what it looks like to be on the other end. So that makes her, I think, in the category of not system approved, but fire forged, as mentioned earlier. And if that's the case, and I believe it is, then what she's doing is probably ideologically pure. I'm going to get to RFK Jr. real quick because he seems to be the other person who's been viciously attacked. He seems highly competent, as does Gabbard. There are wins that are happening on the Trump administration. Like I said, it gives room when some people are doing the right thing for us to push at the others and go, hey, look, DHS, even for the makeup face lady, they're doing a pretty decent job. They at least are focused on the right things. They are working towards case law that might actually open America up to some common sense. ODNI, the real danger, the intel community, there's a push happening. Whether they're winning or not, I don't know. But if they're crying about it, they always tell you where they are most mad. Do you hear anybody crying about the work that's going on from Dan Bongino or Kash Patel? The people that were not supposed to be in office at all? They lost their ever-loving minds that a Trump loyalist was going to take over the FBI, and they've been dead silent. They being the left, the media, the private institutions, the NGOs. Nobody is crying about Kash Patel today. Nobody's crying about Dan Bongino, this wretched partisan. In fact, what I see are defenses happening to the base. Ed Martin going out and talking about him on Tucker Carlson's show. You know, the problem's way bigger than he could have imagined. How? He spent years railing about the problem. I've spent a couple of years looking into the problem because it came for me in the same way that it came for Gabbard. It didn't come for Kash Patel in that same way. I promise you it did not. He's a multimillionaire and he's got proximity to the former president. I'm a guy who lives in a house in a suburb outside Austin. So are my friends. We're regular people. So when you see the wagon circle for people inside the quote unquote MAGA camp and the pom-poms get picked up, and then you see other people, I hear no outrage from the left about Gabbard. And that tells me she's doing the right thing. You hear a lot of outrage about RFK Jr., and that's where I wanted to go. Let's start with him explaining what the role is of the HHS secretary. He's a cabinet level official, and what that has to do with vaccines and the CDC. You know, the stuff that we actually voted for because we saw it weaponized in 2021, fire forged. That's why I led with this. The people that are getting it done have actually gone head to head with the machine prior, and they didn't give in. They decided to stand against it, and then in spite of that, they come forward with more principles. So one last little piece here. I'm going to put it on the screen again. Fire forged means you've been betrayed by the system. They call it rage when they hear the fire, but it's not. They hear instability. We call it conviction, right? It's easily recognizable because they are speaking from a theoretical position and you're speaking from actual wounds and scars. Here's RFK talking about the CDC and what that mission should look like.
What's the role of the Secretary of HHS as far as recommendations of vaccine, and just discuss it a little bit further?
Well, the vaccine recommendations, Senator, are normally made through ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee of Immunization Practices, which is an outside consulting committee at CDC. There's another committee called VRBPAC, which is within FDA, that actually recommends whether the vaccines get licensed or not. And so that's where the recommendations come from. And you know what? Traditionally, they have not done evidence-based medicine. They only adopted evidence-based medicine about 12 years ago. And what we've said during our administration is we want to have safety studies prior to the licensure and recommendation of vaccines. Vaccines are the only medical product that is exempt from pre-licensing safety testing. So the only vaccine that has been tested in a full-blown placebo trial against an inert placebo was the COVID vaccine. The other 76 shots that children in this country receive between birth and 18 years old, none of them have been safety tested in pre-licensing studies against a placebo, which means...
He's talking about things like the mechanics of how stuff works. Have you ever heard an HHS secretary do that in the same way? At least I haven't recently. I'm going to read you something that I found absolutely fascinating. Javier Becerra was the previous HHS secretary under Biden. I just went to his Wikipedia page because I love to see the contrast. That's what I'm mostly interested in. Javier Becerra is an American attorney and politician who served as the 25th Secretary of State of Health and Human Services, a position he held from blah, 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 blah. He's the first Latino to hold the position, and he previously served as the Attorney General of California. He was a member of the United States House of Representatives, representing downtown Los Angeles district in Congress from 1993 to 2017. That's a long time. That's like, what, 24 years? He's a member of the Democratic Party. Okay. And he graduated from Stanford and this and that. Okay, let's do RFK. Let's do RFK right here. Robert Francis Kennedy Jr., also known by his initials RFK Jr., is an American politician, an environmental lawyer, an author, a conspiracy theorist, and an anti-vaccine activist serving as the 26th Secretary of Health and Human Services. Only the enemy will tell you where they are weak. Only the enemy tells you where they have a problem with somebody. And it's a smear. He's a member of the Kennedy family. He's not the first Latino. He's a member of the Kennedy family. He's the son of a senator and former United States Attorney General and the nephew of President John F. Kennedy. I noticed they don't mention right away that he's a Democrat for his whole life. That seems really important. He's been an independent since 2023. Began his career as an assistant district attorney in Manhattan, blah, blah, blah. He focused on some environmental protections. He was a hero of the left right up until the point where he dealt with this nonsense. Here he is talking about fluoride. And again, for a man who is being attacked viciously all the time, he seems to know more about it than the people in the room. Here he is talking to a dentist who wants to go and talk about fluoride being super important. And he gets knocked down by someone who's actually read all the studies, which is not something we ever saw Javier Becerra do. Javier Becerra was he was always like an activist. And he seemed to be like a race hustler from what I could tell. Anyway, here's a discussion about fluoride and whether or not you should have it topically or it needs to be ingested in water. It's like Alex Jones level stuff, except that there's medicine and science behind it. Go figure.
If you are successful in banning fluoride, I noticed you congratulated Utah and Florida, I think, for banning it. That's up to them. They can do what they want. But we better put a lot more money into dental education because we're going to need a whole lot more dentists.
I think that, Marty McCary's concern with ingestible fluoride is that the emerging science shows the benefits to of fluoride to caries and to cavity prevention comes from topical exposures rather than it was once thought that it was systemic, that if you ingested it, that the benefit came from that. We now know that virtually all the benefit is from topical, and we can get that through mouthwashes, we can get through fluoridated toothpastes. The National Toxicity Program issued a report in August, a meta-review of all the science that now exists on fluoride, and showed a direct inverse correlation between fluoride exposure, dose-related, and lower IQ. It's an issue that we have to all be concerned with. We want high IQ kids.
Mr. Hoyer,
right now.
Mr. Hoyer.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you on it.
Okay.
That's what happens when you didn't do your homework and realize that the guy who was going to sit in front of you actually has been reading on this and sees a real problem and says if there's an inverse correlation between the ingestion of fluoride, or the amount of it, and then the IQ of the people who are getting it, if it's actually lowering the IQ of children, yeah, that does seem kind of problematic, doesn't it? Especially if the benefits all come from topical exposure, which is to say, like he said, toothpaste, mouthwash, things that you consume in so much as it's temporary, and then you spit it back out. You don't have to actually ingest it, so there's no systemic benefit from it. I don't know when that guy was in dentistry school, but I bet it was a long time ago, and I bet he wasn't privy to that. Here's another kind of this like weird Gollum-looking troll lady from Connecticut. Is she from Connecticut? I feel like she is. I have to go look up her name again. Every time I see her, I forget because I'm horrified by the fact that she decides to present herself in public. She wants to know, RFK Jr., are you willing to do the job, which is to say follow the law that you swore in to do? It's like, wouldn't it be nice if members of Congress actually did their job and actually appropriated funds specifically so that they actually could do that really easily instead of having to decide for themselves? This has been a big problem. This is what Republicans actually went out there and said. Hey, how about you write laws, line item, that individually appropriate monies for the things that you expect to be done? This is the reason why the Administrative Procedures Act was when Congress lost power. They're still just pretending. Here's a pretender, and she's dressed up like some sort of like a evil Gargamel. I don't know why she does this.
Congress, again, power of the purse resides here, appropriated $246 million for CDC's tobacco prevention programs? Do you commit to following the law again, fully obligating those funds so that we can help adults who want to quit using tobacco and prevent teens from becoming addicted?
Allow me to answer that by pointing out the absolute cataclysmic disorganization of this agency under your oversight for 40 years. We had 9 separate offices of women's health. When we consolidate them, the Democrats say we're eliminating them. We're not. We're still appropriating the $3.7 billion, but we're not keeping all 9. We had 8 separate offices for minority health. We eliminated 1. We had 27 HIV offices.
Okay, let me just, I'm going to interrupt.
We had 59 behavioral health programs.
I'm well over time.
I'm reclaiming my time because I sound ridiculous because I don't know what I'm talking about. Will you follow the law with the government appropriations? Her name is Deloro. Rosa DeLauro. I think Gargamel should be the thing that we call her. She looks like the villain from the Smurfs. She's just what a goofy thing. If you don't even know how your appropriations work, and I'm fairly confident that somebody wrote that up. Listen, if you guys don't know how these hearings work at this point, they're written by aides who are in their 20s, who think that they've got like a gotcha. They got like a slam moment where they're like, we're going to make a cool viral video where you're going to say some tough stuff. And then the other person's going to be flat-footed. And then we're going to be able to run out there, punch it out on a TikTok, punch it out on an Instagram. And we're going to do some social media buzz. And then we're going to do fundraising on it. That's the goal. The goal is, can I say my thing? It comes straight out of the, the people will die kind of thing. She doesn't even care at the end of the day, if I had to guess. She's so old she shouldn't care about anything. She should just care about whether or not she can retire, and why she hasn't is beyond me. These people, how old is she? I've got it sitting here in front of me. It's her 18th term, so she's been in Congress for what, 36 years? Good God. Since 1991, when I was in middle school. Yeah, she's 82 years old. I feel bad for her husband, Stan Greenberg, who's been married to her since 1978. In any case, these people, they're cartoons. She's a cartoon. And she's out there trying to own the guy. She got owned. The question was Robert F. Kennedy, was he worn down by these people? Or is he in no ways tired? Is he fatigable, you think? I think not. I think I'm going to go to Hillary Clinton to explain what RFK Jr. was feeling. This is kind of a 2008 Hillary. You remember when she ran for president?
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me.
Oh, God, it's so bad. How many bullets did we dodge as Americans with that lady not being president? Like all the bullets. Anyway, afterwards, after all this testimony, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. decided to go, I'm going to cleanse you of this. Just hold on, people. Just take a deep breath. I got you. I'm no way feeling tired. Like nobody actually talks. I've never met anyone that talks like fake Hillary Clinton. So I have heard people talk like this, and this is probably the soul of what's going on in our live chat right now. I think many of you are feeling this exact same way. RFK Jr. held a fake press conference. This is a fake AI-generated press conference saying what everybody thought he was going to do, which is that he's going after the unhealthy and the effeminate and the bad things that are happening in this country. He is not in any ways tired either. And here's RFK Jr., a.k.a. fake RFK Jr. This is not real. This is AI, but it's still fun.
I'm declaring war on fat gay kids, not the kids themselves, but on whatever's making them so fat, gay, and pathetic. I'm talking seed oils, SSRIs, MSNBC, and perverts masquerading as teachers and guidance counselors. Sorry, but as an educator, you can't show off your extensive collection of marital aids anymore, okay? America isn't a dance school, a video game competition, or an OnlyFans academy. It's a country. And with the help of President Trump, we'll be focusing on eliminating the things in our society that are turning our kids into effeminate weirdos and skanks.
We need to stop the effeminate weirdo and skank situation. We are not trying to produce that here in America. What we're trying to produce is great ball players from back in the day. I just wanted to cover this because it's been sitting on my desk for a couple days. Pete Rose is among the players that have been removed from the MLB's banned list. If you know anything about what I do here, I do not care about sports ball, and I have not cared about sports ball for a very, very long time. But I grew up playing baseball, and I grew up in a baseball household. My dad used to work for Major League Baseball, and I have seen some incredible things like behind the scenes. I've walked in stadiums when nobody else was there, and the idea of baseball, like the Sandlot experience, still does hit me. And I don't know when it stopped. Maybe it was when Ken Griffey Jr. started wearing his hat backward. Like, that's how far back it goes for me when I'm like, nah, I don't care. But I always did love playing baseball. There's something truly American about the movies like Sandlot and Field of Dreams. And I've been to the Field of Dreams, and I've played catch with my dad and my brothers on the Field of Dreams in Iowa. It's a thing. Pete Rose is part of that history of the thing that I cared about. Same as Shoeless Joe Jackson, if you guys want to know. Pretty neat. They've been removed. There are 15. It's Shoeless Joe Jackson, Pete Rose, and 15 deceased ball players have been removed from the permanent ban list, according to a memo by the league's commissioner. It allows Rose, who accepted a ban for life in 1989, I was a little kid, for gambling on games. He's now eligible for the Baseball Hall of Fame only posthumously, so he has to die first. The decision only applies to dead players who've been placed on the ineligible list, so they will not be inducted in during their lifetime. I think they should rescind that as well. Put freaking Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. I don't know why anybody thinks that's contentious at this point. Like 1989. Oh, no, he died. He died in October. I didn't realize it. Damn it. Well, there you go. I didn't know that. Pete Rose died in October at 83 years old. See, this is how much I pay attention to sports ball. Now you guys know. So now they can all be brought in. So there's 17 total players, it sounds like. He was known for his workmanlike attitude and hustle in the field. It won him innumerable fans. It was the thing that Americans loved. The indefatigable attitude of just getting to work every day. Yeah, I love it. You guys are letting me know that Pete Rose is dead. I got it. I read it. It took me. I don't know. He looked like he was alive there. Look at that. He's always out there. What do they call him? Do they call him Johnny Hustle? Is that what I remember hearing? I feel like my dad should be talking about this. In any case, he was part of 3 World Series wins. I'm not going to sit here. The saddest thing in the world is when somebody gets their entire life judged for one moment. And, you know, whether that was a moment of weakness or what was going on there, we could do better. I think we should have brought him back in. In any case, real sad stuff. That's what I got for today. And I've got one more thing. I'm going to talk about Corey Mills tomorrow. I've been thinking about doing this today, but I think I'm going to wait a little bit longer. There's a brewing situation with an American, quote unquote, MAGA guy. Charlie Hustle. That's right. I don't know why Johnny Hustle. That would make sense. Yeah, Charlie Hustle. Is that right? You guys are correcting me in the chat. This is the problem. I should not step into the sports ball arena. The last time I paid attention to it, I was still prepubescent. I think that's accurate. Okay, we're gonna wrap up today. I actually do have another sort of nostalgic type palate cleanser for you. So I'm not just going to give you RFK Jr. saying that we're trying to stop the fat gay kids. We're also going to do one about nostalgia from the 80s and kidnapping, which is something that I remember growing up with and I'm now thinking about with my own kids. Pretty fun. Here we go. If you guys want to write to the show, if you want to send us a postcard, if you want to send us something weird, by all means, you are welcome to do so. I have this box for you and I get notifications when you send them. 9073 West State Highway 29, Suite 110, Box 509, Liberty Hill, Texas, 78642. You can see it in the show notes, or you can see it in our live chat, generally speaking. And thanks to Rose Lopez, who is constantly putting it out there. Let's do a palate cleanse that makes us all smile. A memory of people who wax lyrical about the old days. This is kind of funny, too, since we're talking about some look backs. Here's one of them.
And of course, guys my age, people, my friends, we love to wax lyrical about the good old days of going outside to play on your own. And then young people always say, yeah, but you could go outside and play back in the day because society was safer back then. Wrong. Society was not safer back then. We just didn't know how unsafe it was. Watch any of these Netflix documentaries. They all begin the same way. Somebody goes, back then we just didn't know. We didn't know. We were clueless. Predators everywhere. A van could have pulled up and been like, hey, kids, get in. We would have been like, yeah, we've seen Scooby-Doo. Let's ride. Let's go. Once we don't go to the abandoned amusement park, I think we're going to be okay. This is what makes me laugh. People are like, oh, society was safer back then. You watch any of these documentaries about the 80s in New York? It was chaos. Plus, we were on the street. No speed bumps. No four-way stop signs. No parents. Just two-hand touch on the street, and we were fine. And yes, I know there were some children kidnapped in the 1980s. But I think it's a worthy sacrifice for 7 or 8 kids on a milk carton for the millions upon millions of happy childhoods that happened as a result of their sacrifice, and it has not gone unnoticed. Thank you for your service. And I know that seems a bit cold, but there's some insurance people here going, that is a good analysis, actually. Risk assessment-wise.
Yep. If you get right down to it, that's true. We don't get judged for just one thing. We hope not. That's not like America is a place of second chances, so that would be useful. All right, folks, want to say I appreciate all of you. Thanks for joining us for the program. You can do so over on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. We happen to go live at 09:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 here in Texas, America. You can also find us on YouTube, as many of you are starting to do. Appreciate all of you that are trying out my experiment. YouTube.com/@Kyle Seraphin. Go and do that. If you want to catch some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, KyleSeraphin.com. I just put together a mobile rig for our local stuff, and we're going to be able to start shooting some things out at the gun range. We're going to probably maybe go do some live streams from some places, see how that works. Lastly, you can find us on Spotify. It's KyleSeraphinShow.com. If you guys want to go do that, you can get both the audio and the video, take it with you, download it or stream it, whatever makes you happy, but you can switch between them. So when you're driving, you don't have to take your eyes off the road. You can go just to audio only. Thanks so much for being part of this little community that we have. Thanks for being part of our show. We're going to go to the American Radicals podcast. If you are watching over on Rumble, you will get what's called a raid. They will dump you in there. And if you are behind the scenes, just hit the back button. It shouldn't automatically take you, but some of you will. Anyway, God bless you. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. It's Friday already. That sounded good. We'll have a friendly Friday. We're going to go straight to Steve Friend with the American Radicals right now.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.